Hello class, we will be going over chapter 4. Welcome to our PowerPoint presentation. Excel, presenting data and charts. I say this is probably by far my most favorite chapter because it's all about visual and pictures and not so much about numbers, and I love it. I'm not sure that you share my sentiment, but I seem to love dealing with charts, and I'm hoping that you would enjoy it and learn something too. Our learning objectives include constructing a line chart to show time series trends. Learn how to adjust the y-axis scale. Construct a line to present a comparison of two trends. We're going to use a column chart to show a frequency distribution, and we're going to create separate charts that embed a worksheet like Word, something that's in Word, or maybe some other area. Also, we're going to construct a chart that compares two frequency distributions. We are going to work on our skills in constructing a stack chart, and this is going to be showing total percentage change to total time, total percent to total changes. Excuse me. We're going to apply formatting commands for both the X and Y axis. We're going to talk about how to make it look beautiful. We're going to also assign titles to these X and Y axes to make it easier for someone to read and understand. We're going to apply some labels and formatting techniques in the plot area of the chart. We're going to learn how to use some formatting commands to plot the area. We're going to use some other different skills to employ series lines, enhance trends to provide additional information on the chart. We're going to learn how to create a scatter chart and show the supply and demand curves for a market, and learn how to adjust the scale of the X and Y axis of a scatter chart. We're going to add trend lines, which I think is extremely neat. And we're going to learn how to paste an image into a chart from either Word or Excel or into a PowerPoint slide. So this is going to be so much fun. Time series trend chart. I think one of the simplest charts is going to be a column chart, and that's probably the default that you can set with your Excel. But one thing is we're going to show trends. And what we do with trends is we want to see how something is changing over a specific time period, maybe over a specific item issue, maybe. In this case, we're going to be dealing with stocks, and we're going to be watching how the price change on the biggest companies in the U.S. We're going to also learn how to use a chart versus a column chart and know what the difference is between the two. I think the biggest thing about charts is knowing which chart is appropriate for the information that you're trying to convey. It's more important than how it looks. It's the most important thing. Secondly, you want it to look and to be easily understood, but an easily understood chart makes no difference if you don't select the correct chart to illustrate. And charts are just that. They're there for illustration. They're there to not necessarily completely replace Word, but to add additional information, to make it easy to understand the words, to work along with the words, not as substitute. So these are some general rules that you'll have when you're looking at the difference between a line chart and a column chart. Choosing the chart type, we just mentioned that it's so important. I mean, oftentimes when you're dealing with charts, people love them because it requires less reading. It's easy to understand. So the goal of choosing the right chart is what type of chart would give the user, the reader of this information, the best presentation of the information that I'm trying to convey. And that's going to guide the chart. Certain data that you will be using will probably lend more to a specific type of chart, and historical trends will show that. But there are times when there's no real right or wrong. It's more how can we communicate a pictorial information that anyone who we choose of our audience would understand. So adjusting the y-axis scale is important because you need to make certain that you control and adjust that scale. You have to automatically, Excel automatically assigns a maximum value, but you can change that. You can also, depend on your data, create a minimum and a maximum. And again, we're trying to kind of deal with a trend. We're trying to show a trend within our chart. A frequency distribution. Generally, it looks best in a column chart, and we'll see examples of that when you're looking through your text, but also when you watch the video demonstrations and skill building activities. But frequency is going to show how much something happens over time. So charts showing frequency is a good way to visualize what's going on, and a column chart and a bar chart is really a great way to see that. They're effective, they're easy to understand, and most people prefer them when they're trying to look at data. Now, when you create that chart, you can leave it embedded inside the worksheet that you're currently working in, or you can also have it dedicated to its own chart sheet. And you can embed information inside a chart. But the most important thing is when you create a chart, you can make it its own dedicated worksheet, or you can have it within the numbers. And sometimes people do both. It depends on what they're trying to communicate. Pie chart is my favorite. I love the pie chart because it talks about a whole and what pieces make up that whole. It's very easy to understand, and it's probably next to the bar chart is probably the most commonly used chart. And what I would suggest to you is think about what kind of charts you use and which one is your most favorite and why. But the percentage of total is really the basis of a pie chart. A stack column chart shows how changes are shown over time, and I love those as well. I use mostly pie charts because of the nature of the work I do, but I have used some column charts, stacked column charts, and I like the presentation. It does help you understand what how things are changing over time. It does give you a good picture. Again, when we're talking about charts, we're talking about pictorial information. We're talking about how can we illustrate information to individuals, to people who needs information in the form of a pictorial image. And graphing our information, our data, has to be done in such a way that the graph is appropriate to the data that we're trying to convey. It's very important. I think more than actually constructing the graph is selecting the correct graph to get your information understood. So when you carefully select the data when creating your chart. What's the independent variable? What's the dependent variable? What's going to be driving how this spreadsheet or how this chart is going to look? That's going to be your independent variable. And everything that depends on that, the movement, the shifting of that chart, how that data or information is going to flow is going to be your dependent variable. So you need to know how your information is going to appear and what should be the x-axis and the y-axis. Now, one of the things that this is one thing that you have to note, just because you had this really huge spreadsheet, everything in your workbook does not have to be included in your chart. You really have to be careful of what you want to present. We want the charts to be a simple picture, easily understood. So be very careful what you put in there and understand what needs to be put in that chart. The x-axis and the y-axis have to be able to be information that can be related, that are related to one another in some way, either inversely related or directly related. But you don't have to put everything into your chart that you have in your spreadsheet. You can select various pieces of information and create a specific chart. For example, in my case, I have this really huge spreadsheet, and there's a truckload of information in it. And what I have done to show the relationship among the different variables is to create a chart using an X and Y axis with different aspects of that information. Therefore, I have about 4 different charts using my entire spreadsheet, but showing the relationships among those variables in a very easy to understand way, meaning isolating 2 independent and dependent variables and creating a chart, and so forth and so on, such that individuals can see the relationship of the entire workbook without seeing it all in one chart. It just makes it so much easier. Again, the whole point of using a chart is to illustrate a picture and to convey information using a picture. So the less words you have, the better. Therefore, using your entire workbook in one chart may not make it easy for them to understand, but breaking those charts into smaller or more different ones using relationships among 2 pieces of information in one chart makes everything easier. It's easier to construct it, it's easier to format, but it's easier for others to understand. So line charts are important too. And they again are charts that we want to make certain that we create these line charts consistent with what they are intended to do. So a line chart, you have to place anything in the x-axis, has to be a descriptive label, not a numeric label. And then important is also The spacing is going to have to be important, and keeping that. These little technical things are important, and you will grasp those as we continue to create more charts. When you're looking at a chart of any type, make certain that the chart is absolutely representative of the data that it's trying to extract. We really don't want to give conflicting information with our graphs. We don't want to mislead people with our graphs. We want to make them easier to understand and useful for people for making decisions, but we don't want it to be complicated and confusing. So that's one of the questions that you're asking yourself. Not only do you want to know what chart is most appropriate, not only want to make certain that you don't include every bit of information on one chart, break them out. If you want to be able to show charts of your entire workbook, breaking it out into different charts is probably the better route, or extracting information that's most critical for the user to understand. Secondly, making certain that your bars and your information can be compared with one another. Either there's a relationship between the two numbers. So there are no limit to the bars you can use, but again, we don't want a complex worksheet. We want a worksheet that's easy to understand, a worksheet that provides information that we can make a picture of, and we want to use it in such a way that the column is not gobbled with things and no one knows what the information is being presented. What is the message behind this picture that I'm looking at? So you need to use a little bit more integrity checks to make certain that it meets that objective. Make sure your charts make sense. They're not overly complicated, so the person can look at it and read and understand without a whole lot of words. Here are some questions that you really should have the answer to when you're reading through the chapter, just to reinforce that you understand what the chapter or what the different areas are talking about or addressing. So I suggest you look at these very carefully, because if you have a question, if you have this question here, which of the following is critical to do in order to create an effective chart in Excel, and you get the answer incorrect, it's a good idea to go back and reread the area. I suggest reading with understanding, because once you get involved in practice, you really need to have a firm understanding of what you need to do, particularly when it comes to creating charts, because there are some rules that you'll need to follow to get the right chart and create it to look the way you want it to look. Here's another question that I think you should know before you proceed to actually practicing, and is, which of the following is the most efficient method for adding labels to each section of a pie chart? That's important, because you're going to be creating a pie chart for your assignment, so you want to know kind of how is the best way to do it. You don't want it to be cumbersome. You want it to be a very simple and easy way to create a chart, or to add labels to a chart, to a pie chart specifically. So if once you've read the chapter and you read over the questions that are presented here, if you get them wrong, that's an indication that you need to go over and you reread the information before actually practicing the skills. And this is the final question. You've established a personal budget. The spending section of your budget is broken down into 5 categories. To show how the percent to total for each spend category has changed over a 3-year period of time, it would be best to use which of the following chart types. This one here is a good example of knowing exactly what you want to convey, and the question is, thinking it through, how do you present this information that shows how the percent of total for each category has changed over a 3-year period of time. You got to get a visual picture of your mind as to how this information should look to be understood, and then determine which chart is the best chart: a line chart, column chart, stacked column chart, or a pie chart. And again, if you get the wrong answer, don't dismay. Just go back, reread the area, and talk about, and then think about the types of charts and what they are intended to display. That may very well help you, guide you to selecting the right answer and selecting the right chart. The X and Y axis, the titles, and it's an easy thing to do to format a chart. It really is not much challenge to format a chart. It's just that you need to make certain that those charts are formatted so that they don't come up as series 1, series 2, that type of thing. You want them to be clear so that the person who's reading it absolutely knows what's being compared with what. Adding labels does help, is a key formatting feature. Data labels is also displayed, not always shown on a chart. I mean, sometimes depending on what information you want to convey, you may not want to show every bit of information. Some things just, it will just add to the chart, making it more hard to read. Again, this is a picture. We want it to be a simple picture, as simple as possible given the data that you're trying to convey. Adding series lines and annotations to charts. These are different things that you can do to create a chart that has useful information, clarify information that in your chart, identify sources where things have originated. Again, we want the chart to be able to stand on its own. We don't want a lot of words to have to explain anything on the chart, because that means the chart has not done what it's supposed to do. The chart is intended to be a picture. It's to be the pictorial information from maybe some narrative, possibly, or some financial or number related information. So really, the chart really should be able to stand on its own. The information contained therein should be able to stand on its own and should be just understood in isolation, so much so that it adds to or it complements, but it never contradicts the data from which it's derived or any narrative that accompanies it. Annotations and titles and all of that kind of thing. But again, this is important because you want your title to be understood and not misinterpreted. We don't want people to make wrong assumptions. We want them to clearly understand what they're looking at and what it's trying to say to you. And also, when they have numbers to support it, which oftentimes a chart has, you need to make certain that both of them are saying the same thing. No contradictory information. So as you're going through these particular sections, go through them again. Go through the multiple choice questions. They are a guide to let you know that you understood at least the technical aspects of what the section is talking about. Any questions you get incorrect, you need to go back and reread that area again before working on the actual practice problems. The scatter chart is going to be more like showing a supply and demand is a good chart to use. And again, this is just showing you how when you're using information and you're trying to show a lot of data on one chart, a scatter chart is a good one because it doesn't show specific items, but it shows a whole lot of different items and their relationship to one another. But a scatter chart has to be created in the correct way so that information is usable and is relevant. So what we need to do is make certain if we need to use a scatter chart, let's create this scatter chart correctly so the information we can rely on. Now, this chart you have to make certain that your X and Y axis have numbers. They're numerical. They must be numerical. The scatter chart will not work. And these are the limitations. Understand each one of the charts that you have, particularly the major ones, meaning the scatter, the pie, the bar, the column. Make certain that those major charts that you know what their purposes are and what their limitations are and what types of things that you need to input in order to create the most effective chart. So it always talks about it just give you some helpful hints. Make sure it's blank, and you know add your data series individually. There is a method to this madness. Make certain that you have all the information done correctly with this chart. Most people have a little bit of an issue. Make sure you have your minimum and maximum values. That's important because you're doing a scatter chart and this information is extremely relevant. Also, you want to make certain that you modify the scale if you need to. Trend lines within a equation, that's generally done, in my case, it's been done in finance when we're trying to analyze and we're trying to trend out or establish a trend and within an equation type of situation. Adding a trend line is extremely important, and it does help you predict where plots may occur at various X and Y axes. And you are able to embed this trend line to your chart if you need to. And I've done that several times within the school context. But in the workplace, I never had a need to add a trend line. Again, as you go through this section, be certain that you get the answers of the multiple choice questions correct before proceeding on to the next section. Again, it is one warning system that you may need to reread a section if you are getting an answer or two wrong. One of the things that I love about Microsoft Excel is that you can embed your chart into another Microsoft Office product like PowerPoint and Microsoft Word. This is important, and the reason why it is because when you're delivering a report for somebody to read, it's nice to see that it's all in one place, that the charts are embedded in the words and they both complement one another. Or in the case of giving a presentation, it is also very, very nice and seamless to have the chart that you created in Excel embedded into a PowerPoint presentation. And it just goes to show how it makes the presentation of your data very easy to understand, and for the watchers or the listeners and the readers of your information in PowerPoint or in Microsoft Word, having the chart right there as you explain it is always great because it puts pictures to the words that you're speaking right on the same page most cases. So I personally like to do that. And oftentimes when I give up information that's complicated, I embed a chart to show, to give an illustration to all the words that I have been using for that particular report. And PowerPoint is another, is one of the major places where we embed um, bed charts. Now, my experience has always been using Excel and Word together. I create these wonderful charts in Excel and I embed them into my Microsoft Word report, and it works so well. But that being said, there is no limit to what you can do by cutting and pasting. They are all compatible with one another because they're one big happy family, and to move them from one place to another is quite seamless with with no issues that I can think of. Now, one of the things you can do is you can link it. Now, I did that in school. I don't particularly like to create links within a chart simply because the people I'm talking to are not going to be looking at my electronic PowerPoint or my electronic Word. They're actually looking at a physical piece of paper. However, when you are creating charts and you want to embed it into your Microsoft Word document, but you don't want to create two files to send to them, you can create a link inside of that Word document. And every time that Word document or that Excel document is modified, the chart is changed, the link will automatically be updated. And it's an efficient way to keep from sending 6 or 7 files where you can actually create a link embedded inside your document. And all the person has to do is open up the link and they can see the Microsoft Excel chart or any other database workbook that you want them to see all in one file. And it makes it so much easier to send one file and then send 4 or 5, particularly when you put those links within certain areas where they need to see or it'll be illustrated a specific chart or graph or some other information that you have created in Excel. So it's efficient. And maybe you had your boss or maybe your organization requires you to give one file, and then you are faced with a dilemma. If you have one file to send and you can only send one file, embedding that link inside Excel or Word or PowerPoint is a great way to make certain that the file remains a certain size, easy to open and close, and everything that you need is in one place. Just makes it a little easier. So one of the things that you have to make certain that you do to ensure that your link does work is make sure that it's in this original location. Don't change it. Make sure that if it's on your C drive or on your flash drive, that's where it remains because it's going to be referencing that, and it will link. If it's gone, it won't work. Don't move your Excel or delete it because you'll get an error message when your system tries to open your Word document that it contains the link. It will get an error message. So those are the kinds of things that you have to be aware of when you're actually embedding a link versus embedding the actual chart into your Word document or your PowerPoint presentation. But again, this is probably the fun part of working with charts. It's actually trying to figure out how to make them nice and embed them into a different Microsoft Office program. And it's pretty easy. And linking a file into the Word document is great, or into a PowerPoint presentation is really neat because you can just use one file to do everything you need. So as you look at these Excel Word charts being linked in or being copied and pasted in, either way, it's really up to you. It's really a personal preference how you do it, as long as you know what options are available to you. Finally, looking at these multiple choice questions that are in at each and every section, just be certain that you understand what these questions are asking and you get the answers correct before proceeding on to the next section. As I said before, thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again.